I noted that the more left-brained among you would have some issues with the selection matrix, and in particular that it assumes that all of the criteria are equally important, and secondly that it only has 3 levels of differentiation in terms of its rating scale. And I suggested that there was an alternative approach called the scoring matrix. Let me warn you that the right brain among you won't like the scoring matrix at all, and so this is strictly optional. And let me also note parenthetically that if you have a hard time remembering which one is left brain, which one is right brain, the mnemonic that I like is that left is logical. And so if I just remember left is logical, I remember which is left and which is right. Let me show you the scoring matrix, and let me warn you that this can easily devolve into philosophical debate, and in fact there's a whole branch in academics called decision theory, and the scoring matrix is essentially a simple version of what's called multi-attribute utility analysis. And there's a nice book by Keeney and Rafa on multi-attribute utility analysis, and that goes in all and analyzes all of the nuances of these various schemes. But this basic overview will give you what you need to know. The only real change to this that's reflected in the scoring matrix is that instead of assuming that each of the criteria are equally weighted, we explicitly assign a weight to each of the criteria. So in this case, I use a percent weighting, and so those percents sum to 100, and I assume that elegance and beauty, wow factor, and cost are each worth 10%. The nice shape of the ball is worth 20. The removes all material from containers worth 15, and quick and easy is the most important at 35%. Of course, there are various ways you can establish relative importance empirically. In fact, there's a whole branch of marketing that attempts to model consumer preferences and to estimate these weights. But in design, these weights are almost always established by subjective judgment. And then the other thing that's done here is that instead of using -1, 0, and 1, I expand the rating scale to be from 1 to 5. Now, some of you will observe, the really left brain among you will observe that in some cases I'm only using a little bit of the rating scale, say in this case from 2 to 3, and that in effect what I'm doing by using only a little bit of the rating scale is I'm making this criterion even less important. So even though it's only shown at 10%, it's effectively weighted even less because I'm using less of the rating scale. Nevertheless, you use a scale of 1 to 5, at least that's a reasonable way to do it. And then what you then do is in this cell, instead of just doing a simple sum of these values, you use the sum product function in your spreadsheet, which essentially takes a weighted average of these values using these weighting factors. So sum product of this column and these ratings would then give you a weighted average of the values in these cells. And you see that it doesn't really change things very much. The swoop scoop is still very highly rated. It would, I suppose, give you a little bit of ability to differentiate among these 3 concepts. But I have to say, in general, the scoring matrix is overkill, at least in my opinion, but I do show it here to you for completeness.